I just want to mention one little thing. I want to mention that we're going to start a new series tonight. It's a series I did a couple of years ago, and I kind of like it. It's called the Shame series, but it's based on the different faces of shame. So I'll be working on that tonight, and then I'll be doing 2 other lectures connected with shame also in the weeks to come. So I'm going to start off tonight by doing the reading from the language of letting go. And I picked a reading or parts of the reading from June the 5th. Combating shame. Shame can hold us back, hold us down, and keep us staring at our feet. Watch out for shame. Many systems and people reek of shame. They are controlled by shame, and we want us to play their game with them. They may be hoping to hook us and control us through shame. We don't have to fall into their shame. Instead, we'll take the good feelings, nurturing, self-acceptance, and love. Our past and the brainwashing we may have had that imposed original shame upon us may try to put shame on us. This can happen when we're all alone, walking through the grocery store, and just quietly go about living our life. Don't think, don't feel, don't grow, don't change. Don't be alive. Don't live life. Be ashamed. Be done with shame. Attack shame. Go to war with it. Today, I will deliberately refuse to get caught up in the shame floating around in our world. If I cannot resist it, I will feel it, accept it, and be done with it as quickly as possible. God, help me know that it's okay to love myself, and help me to refuse to submit to shame. If I get off course, help me learn to change shame into guilt, correct the behavior, and move forward with my life in immediate self-love. I wanted to read that because it kind of fits into this series that I'm doing, and I kind of like this process because one of the books I recommend all the time, is John Bradshaw's book, Healing the Shame That Binds You. It's a very powerful and beautiful book. I had the opportunity years ago to attend a workshop that he did. And one of the beautiful things about the workshop and about the book is that it really clarifies so many things in my life and so many things in all of our lives. Because shame is part of all of our journey. We experience shame in very many different ways. So tonight, what I want to do, I want to talk about what I call the faces of shame. And then next 2 weeks, I'll talk more about the recovery process and how we work with it. There are many different faces of shame. There's something called original shame. That's the shame we experience through the concept of growing up. Many of us in the early years of our life, in our foundation years, have picked up many shame-based behaviors, many shame-based messages. And most of those messages were basically put on us, not necessarily in a negative way, they were put on us in a control way. And so I realized over and over again in growing up in my own life, I received many negative messages, many messages of shame. One of the classic ones many of us have received over and over again is that little kids should be seen and not heard. You are not allowed to have a voice. You can't express how you feel. In short, in the Italian language, they would say, state zitta, shut up. Don't bother me. Leave me alone. So every time you tried to do something, or you tried to even express your feelings, it's almost like a clamp was put down on them. And as a result, then you also picked up shame from, other areas in your growth process, other family systems, from your neighborhood, from your peers, from people around you. I remember growing up as a child, I had some wonderful nicknames. For example, Church Mouse, Mama's Boy. I also had a very wonderful name called Little Fat Boy. So I have very fantastically beautiful shame-based names. And the amazing part about it is these things act deep down inside of you. They become part of you. Then as a result, then you kind of have a tendency to either want to isolate or hide or run away because that shame is built inside of yourself as a person, especially when basically you also pick up that shame from our religious backgrounds. I smile at this, but growing up in Camden, back in the wonderful years of the 40s, we had these wonderful ladies that taught us in grammar school. They called them nuns, but I really believe they were drill sergeants for the Marine Corps. This scared the living crap out of me. See, shame is masked very many times in things such as guilt, fear, pity, all kinds of different ways that we experience different aspects of shame. And so it can come to us from all different spots, all different places. And the thing about it is, and the reading said that tonight, it gets embedded inside of us. It becomes part of us. Then later on in life, like the book said, you'd be walking through the grocery store and somebody looks at you or something happens, no matter what it is, and all of a sudden the stuff comes up. And so very many times we become very self-centered and very conscious about a lot of this. Even in our world today, social media is a very powerful way of inflicting shame. And many of us have received all different types of messages, and those messages are bombarded on top of us. And as a result, then we begin to look at things through the eyes of distrust, through the eyes of shame, through the eyes of guilt, through the eyes of fear. All these things basically are built into our system. And so very many times what John did when he described the wheel of shame, as he called it, he realized the fact that shame has many faces in many different areas. There's also what they refer to as learned shame, things we learn in the course of our growth process in life. I know basically, growing up in my background and going through the seminary. In the seminary, they taught me many elements of shame. For example, one of the ones my father taught this to me at the beginning, he didn't even know he was teaching it to me. My father taught me that you must always do everything for everybody else. And if you do anything for yourself, you're being selfish. Not that he said that, but the way he was and his example kind of brought that out to me. And so very many times I felt the elements of shame in the fact that I felt like I was being a selfish little boy because I wasn't doing things the way people wanted me to do them. And that's inherited shame. You pick it up in that direction. It becomes part of you. Later on in the seminary, they taught us that wonderful thing, to be all things to all people at all times. Good luck with that one. That's totally amazing. You know what I mean, Dot? It's totally amazing. To always be on duty, to always be available, to always be this, to always be that. But the bottom line was, if you ever made time for yourself, or you learned that very spiritual word, which took me a long time to learn, the word is no, or I can't. And I'm grateful to Recovery today because they've been able to help me in very many ways to be able to move away from this. But even in my work and things that I do in life, shame was a big element of it. Sometimes I feel like enabling is shame because so many times I want people to be what I want them to be. And so I can literally either make someone into a victim or I can become a victim. I call it victim shame. It's another whole aspect of life. We pick it up very many times in the course of our journey. I remember many times, I just always share the story, but when I studied for my master's degree in counseling at LaSalle University, and then when I went to do my internship and my training at DRC in Philadelphia, I remember many days thinking I was going to fix everybody and save everybody. And as a result, then I literally was shaming people. I didn't know it. I thought it was me doing the job I was supposed to be doing. And I remember one time I had this lady in the room and she was an alcoholic. And I decided she's going into treatment. I don't care whether she didn't want to go. She wasn't getting out of that room until she went into treatment. And I worked on her. And finally, my supervisor came up to me and he said, "Come here, Vince." And he whispered to me, "The lady wants to drink. Leave her the hell alone." I thought that was terrible. See, I was supposed to save her and rescue her. I finally have learned something. I can't save anybody. I can carry a message. And the old timers in AA taught me this a long time ago. They taught me, carry the message, not the drunk. You can't carry another person. Yet very many times we try to do it. It gets us into all kinds of trouble and puts us in a lot of places that truly do hurt us. And that's what I've learned. I can also experience what I call victim shame, which means I put it on myself. It's totally amazing when you come right down to it. I can actually put so much pressure on myself as a person that I can then start that process of blaming everybody else. You see, whether I realize it or not, because I didn't get what I wanted, then literally I inflicted shame on all kinds of institutions, people, circumstances, and situations because I wanted them to do what I wanted them to do. I wanted them to fit into what I wanted in my life. And as a result, then I realize now what that's really all about. A very powerful, powerful reading in one of my recovery books. And the book is, the reading is called The Iceberg Theory. And literally what it is a diagram. I'm going to ask Loretta, I'm going to have it sent over to her and ask her if she can put it on our website so that you can pick it up. I'll tell you about that next week. But it's a beautiful diagram, what they call the iceberg theory. It's almost like all these addictions, all these behaviors and stuff are literally our codependency, everything are the surface. Underneath, there's all this stuff. There's this whole fear, there's this guilt, there's this shame, these things we feel deep down inside. But most of us have been experts. Of course, I'm talking about me. Most of us have been experts at burying that crap, putting it inside, avoiding it, running away from it, putting a wall around us. See, I don't want somebody to really know who I really am. So as a result, what do? I perform, I function on the outside, but there's no inside. And so as a result, then literally for a long period of time, oh yeah, you did a lot for other people. You did this, you did that. You ran around like crazy. In my book, I wrote on my spiritual journey. I was out 5 nights a week, running around, doing talks, doing all kinds of stuff. I was on the road, selling books out of the trunk of my car. I learned that in South Philadelphia, doing all kinds of crazy stuff. It's totally amazing. And basically, I was totally out of control. And I literally had no sense of me. And I literally constantly figured it was my job to fix people. And yet at the same time, how to slow down, how to learn to take care of me. And that's one of the things we'll talk about in the next 2 sessions, because I really believe very deeply that shame is part of all of our lives. And yet we have to learn not to make ourselves victims, but make other people victims. I remember my therapist, and I love the guy, Dr. Stern used to always say to me, it's your issue, not theirs. Leave them alone. Stop blaming. Stop doing all this crazy stuff. Stop wanting things to be the way you want them to be. And that comes down to basically fear of yourself. Whenever I describe codependence, I always have a little visual. I describe us as Kelvinator freezers. We're beautiful, we look nice on the outside. We even come in different colors, sizes, and shapes. But deep down inside, we're frozen solid. You see, I've learned over the years, I've carried a lot of this stuff with me. Yes, I inherited it. Yes, I connected it. In the world we live in today, I check this, I check it all the time. We live in a very dysfunctional, a very crazy, a very insane world. And by the way, I think by nature it's supposed to be, because we're human beings. But as a result, then I have a tendency to want to take on a lot of that. I have a tendency to get caught up in all that. But really, in reality, I've got to stay in my own lane. I have to work on my own stuff. I have to go on my own journey. But it's a lot more fun to go on somebody else's journey than to put a pity trip on them, than to do the crazy stuff. It's just amazing. I'll never forget, when I wrote my first book, Relationships, the Gifts of Life. And I got excited because my first book, I was really excited. I went home to my wonderful, fantastic Italian family. And I came in with the book. I was going to show them all about the book and everything else. And my aunt stood up and literally in my face said to me, "You didn't talk about the family, did you?" She scared the living crap out of me. I took the book, sat on it, and didn't say another word about the book for the whole entire time I was there. She scared the hell out of me. And as a result, I actually felt guilty and I felt bad because I did talk about the family in the book. But see how the old tapes play? These are all the things that were drilled inside of me way back. And as soon as she yelled at me, boom, all the old tapes went off. Everything else happened. This can happen very easily in your life when you just have a confrontation with somebody and maybe they get too loud or something happens or something reminds you. We have all little things that kind of hit this stuff and open it up inside of us. And as a result, then we have to learn, which is really important, how to be able to embrace it. I've learned over the years, I carried a lot of crap inside of me for a long time. A lot of negative stuff, a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, a lot of frustration, fear, anxiety, and literally lived in a hidden world for a long time. And I was afraid. And I still experience a lot of this today because as soon as I experience criticism sometimes, that wall wants to go right back up. And I've got to learn not to let that wall go up. But that wall is going to be part of my life for the rest of my life. In some ways, I may need it sometimes for protection. But as a result, I got to be able to build a relationship with the wall. It's part of who I am. And so there are certain things that are going to happen in the course of my journey in life. They're going to put that wall back up again. They're going to be able to bring me back into those old ways again. And it's all part of it. And I realize more and more because I experienced this at Starting Point a lot because I do all the referrals, I do a lot of the clinical work. And very many times I get into a lot of frustration because I get demands from people. They want certain things. I can't give them to them. And then, there's a little bit of the crazy Italian in me that has to try to figure out a way to get it to them. But sometimes I have to simply say to them, look, I'm sorry. We don't have that. We can't do that. I have to send you someplace else and give you another idea, another direction. But the old me would have felt a lot of shame because I had to send them someplace else. Because I had to tell them to go look and check things out. It's just amazing sometimes how we put ourselves in all these predicaments. But I know now that it's shame. And I realize over and over again, and I learned this in Al-Anon, that very many times when you're dealing with an addict, the worst thing you can do in very many ways is basically tell that addict how rotten and how terrible and rotten he is. Because all you're doing is you're activating the shame, and then I've got another excuse to drink because you did this to me, and because you're bringing this stuff is all coming up, I got to put it back down again. So I can look for a lot of ways for excuses, for ways to avoid. But really, in reality, we have to learn something. That our crap, that stuff we have inside of us, the shame, all these things, they're part of who we are. Now, I learned this a long time ago. I can't get rid of the shame that I have inside of me. It's part of my makeup, part of my nature, it's part of my history. The secret I've learned is I got to be able to face it, embrace it, learn from it, and go through the process of transforming it and let it become something positive for me. I got to be able to learn techniques, I have to be able to learn ways to be able to deal with my shame instead of avoiding it or running away from it. But the faces of shame can be very strong. I've said this over again, all my work I've done with addicts, that addicts fundamentally carry inside themselves a tremendous amount of shame. We have a tendency to beat ourselves up like crazy. And as a result of that, we literally do a number on ourselves more so than people do on us. We put ourselves back into those predicaments. And one little thing could happen. Now, if you're in recovery, you know what I'm talking about. One little thing can happen that can trigger it. Then all of a sudden, you feel like you're right back there where you were before. It's totally amazing. And that's why there's no such thing as getting it perfectly. I said before, one of the greatest shame-based words on the face of this earth is perfection. Perfection. Where I have to literally feel like I have to be the way somebody else wants me to be. For example, physically, I have to be able to say, how come I don't look as good as that person looks? So I have negative images about my body. And so literally I look at it negatively. Being in an eating disorder program, I experience this every so often. I have what I call fat days. I look in the mirror and I see this obese person in the mirror, even though it's not real. And yet to me it is. It's because I feel all of a sudden that shame and that guilt, all the feelings going on inside of me. I start the process of beating myself up. In AA, they call this the dry drunks, the dry highs in AA. And we have lots of names for these, but literally what it is our emotional system kicking in. And we literally feel like we're going back. In some ways, it's good if we can talk about it, process it. We have to learn to have appropriate places to process it. Many of us even inflict shame, for example, through self-disclosure on ourselves and then on others. So many times we get caught up in expectations. Expectations create a lot of shame. And as a result, and I tell people all the time, we have to be careful with self-disclosure. Now, you walk down the street, your neighbor says, hi, please don't do a fifth step with him. Scare the man half to death. You wonder why there's a for sale sign in his house the next day, why he's hiding in his garage when he sees you coming down the street. Come on. There's a time and there's a place for everything in the course of our journey. We have to learn that. Because in doing something like that, what am I doing? I'm dumping something on him that's inappropriate, and I'm scaring him and creating fear and shame in him. And as a result, then I'm literally, and we do this to people so many times, we do. I try to dump my stuff on somebody else, hoping they'll take it. Then it becomes theirs, not mine. And literally, so many times in my life, I've become that sponge. I tell codependents a lot of times, one of the tricks I have with codependents, I tell them to carry a piece of a dish rag in their pocket. And every time you get caught up in these behaviors, to hold on to that dish rag. You're not somebody's dish rag, you're not somebody's sponge. Yet so many times we allow ourselves to be that because we go back to things that were normal for us at one time. I joke about this today, but I know it's not a joke. I've often said shame-based messages. For example, my mother used to always say to me, don't do anything because you might get hurt. Don't ride a bike, don't do this, don't do anything. And literally, I always felt like other people told me to do it, and I felt like so shameful because I couldn't do it, because I was scared, I was afraid. I had to learn these things later. Even when to fly in an airplane, I still remember my mother's words, oh my God, they come to me all the time. If God wanted you to fly, God would have given you wings. Do you know I didn't fly in an airplane until I was 48 years old? My wife had to talk me into getting on an airplane. And because I could swear, if I walk down that walkway, my mother will be standing there waiting for me, telling me, no, 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 no. These are tapes, we call that play inside of us. They're normal. You're going to get them every so often. And that's why when they come up, when these things happen, you have to be able to somehow process it, deal with it, and not allow it to overtake you. But it's going to overtake you sometimes too. And that's what happens a lot of times, even in the social world, the physical world, even the athletic world. So many times in the athletic world, we have a tendency so many times to feel like we have to perform a certain way. And so much pressure is put on us. Having umpired baseball for years and referee basketball, I could see the pressure that was put on young kids to perform. And many of the kids I refereed, many of the kids I umpired used to say to me, I wish my parents would not come to my games. I wish they would stay home. They're embarrassing me. And that's sad to hear a kid say that, when really in reality it's true, because they want you to be something you're not. I'll never forget, I was umpiring a Little League baseball game. And the kids in Little League, they're pretty small. And so whenever I umpired a Little League game, I used that balloon because I was hiding behind them. It was crazy. So he has a little kid there catching. He probably weighed, I don't know, 45 pounds, who knows? And his father's behind the screen screaming at him, block the plate, block the plate. Remember, be like Johnny Bench, block the plate. Johnny Bench gets millions of dollars for standing there and getting his body wrapped up. This little kid blocked the plate. The guy coming around third base would have killed him if he blocked the plate. I told the little kid, back off. Thank God they had a rule in Little League and not allowed to block the plate. But Daddy didn't know about the rule. What can I tell you? But see, so many times, what do? We try to relive our life in our child. Because we couldn't do this, I want him to do this. And so many times we get caught up in that. And I realize over and over again, that's what happens when the anger and the frustration, all this stuff comes into play. And so many times, what do? I take it out on somebody else. I create shame to somebody else. We see this a lot of times, and I did a lot of work for years in Philadelphia in domestic violence court and domestic family court. And so many times they used to say, people that do things, that do crazy stuff in their life, it's because they kept everything built inside of them for a long period of time, that it came out sideways. It's got to come out somewhere. It's like the tea kettle theory. It's got to come out or they're going to explode. And sometimes it comes out on the wrong people, the wrong places, at the wrong time. Coming home from work and I'm frustrated, you take it out on your spouse, you take it out on your kids, you take it out on somebody. And literally as a result, then you create this fear, you create all these things. And so many times I've seen this happen. A good friend of mine, I've known her for a long time, and she has this tremendous fear of anger because basically growing up as a kid, she lived in a home where her father was always drunk and the mother was always screaming and yelling at him. And literally he used to scream and yell back at her. And she used to just sit there and cringe like crazy, just cringe. And now when she's around people who get loud, who get angry, she goes right into that little position again of cringing right away. The old tape plays inside of her head. I share this with you because we talk about the faces of shame. There are many different faces of shame, but those faces of shame many times are masked in things like guilt, fear, anger, frustration, things we go through in the course of our life, identity. So many times, literally, I don't have a good identity of myself as a person. So what do? I keep wanting somebody else's identity. I keep looking at somebody else. Why can't I be like her? Why can't I be like him? Why can't you be this? Why can't you be that? Many of us have done this even in relationships. We see it, two people in a relationship, we say, they have the perfect relationship. We've all done this. When in reality, they're two human beings. And they're having their problems like everybody else is having. They're going through their changes like everybody else is going through. We have to allow people to be human, to allow ourselves to be human. I've learned over the years, I don't want to be perfect. Please stop all that nonsense. Nobody's perfect. Because if you're perfect, then guess what? You're probably in a cemetery. Because, they lay you out and you look perfect then. That's not a problem. But the bottom line is that's not perfection. Perfection is actually death in very many ways. I think one of the greatest elements of shame is striving for perfection strive for things to be exactly the way I always want them to be. Come on, we've got to learn to go with the flow. Got to learn to relax. You got to learn to realize the fact that, come on, we're human. As you get older, you become more human. What are you going to do? Charlie knows that, right, Charlie? Become more human as you get older. It's all part of it. Jeff knows it. It's all part of the process we go through in life. We have a few aches and pains. Things go in this direction. You can't move as fast as you used to move. Little things hurt here and there. Isn't that wonderful? It's fantastic. Makes you feel like you're alive. But I can look at that negatively and say, why can't I do this? I mean, I'll be honest with you. I get this craving inside of me to referee basketball games. I love doing it. But I got news for you. I wouldn't last 5 minutes running up and down that court with 15 and 16-year-olds. They would scare me half to death. But there's a part of me that thinks I could do it. I used to say this to my wife all the time. She used to laugh at me. What can I tell you? When I was up in base, I'm going to referee basketball until I'm 98 years old. She said, okay, whatever. Her response to that one. And you know what? Come on. But see, we have these things inside of us, right? I want to do this. I want to get this done, but this is what I can do. This is what I can't do. It's all part of the journey that we're on in life. And yet, we beat ourselves up so much. So take a break, will you? No. Put the whip away. Stop beating yourself up. We're just people on a journey. We're doing the best we possibly can do. We learn as we go along. And all of you know what I refer to constantly as my fertilizer theory. We all got a bunch of crap inside of us. And if you process it, it becomes fertilizer for recovery. What can I tell you? The steps tell us about this all the time. The steps are the key to this whole thing. The steps are teaching us the importance of processing stuff in our life and then being able to use it in a positive way. These are some of the techniques and some of the ways we're going to do when we talk about, like next week, I'll talk a lot about what I refer to as shame reduction. See, try to remember something. Shame is part of life. I got to say this as strong as I can. You're not going to get rid of it. It's part of our makeup. So I have to learn how to reduce it, bring it down to a manageable level, then be able to use it in a way that will help me and be positive for me. It's like everything else we do in life. I got to be able to embrace it, and then I got to reduce it. So we'll spend a lot of time not on curing shame, but on reducing shame. Reduction is the key. I always remember when John Bradshaw talked about that, because I'm no different than you or anybody else. I figure if I get into therapy and I work with this crazy therapist, then all of a sudden, all this stuff's going to go away. Your history is not going to go away. Sorry about that. It's part of who you are. And on occasion, it comes back to visit. Things are going to key us. It happened. We got to be in touch with them and realize what it's really all about. It's amazing. I share this with my wife all the time. I guess it was quite a while ago. I've told you about this a long time ago. I had a major accident. I was hiking up in the Poconos and I slipped on wet leaves and went flying down the mountainside of the mountain. And I almost went into the waterfall, except that there was a stump that stopped me. Thank God it hit me really hard. I ached for a few days, but I rather ache than land in a waterfall. And even on occasion now, the fear of falling, the fear of doing things, I go down steps now, like I make sure I grab onto that rail. I watch even more closely now, because those things are still there. When you go through experiences in life, and I even use the term, trauma shame. Many of us have gone through some major traumas in our life. And there are things that are going to bring those traumas back up again. It's okay. The most important thing is don't eat them, share them, work with them, process them. And these are the things I want to work on in the next 2 weeks, kind of reducing shame and processing it. and being able to move it into something positive and beautiful. And that's the thing I'm learning a little bit at a time in my life, because I know I still go through a lot of these things. Even being able to accept compliments. It's hard sometimes. So many of us don't think we deserve it. And yes, people can see in us so many things we can't see in ourselves, because very many times, what do? We keep putting ourselves down. People say, oh, thank you so much. You did this, you did that. I did. Oh, okay. It's crazy. And yet it's all part of the process we go through in life. So I just wanted to cover tonight the elements of what I refer to as the faces of shame. It may have been a little depressing, but that's okay. It's part of it too. Depression is part of that shame thing too. But I'm realizing when I look at that iceberg, I love that theory from one of my recovery books, the concept of, thawing out the iceberg a little bit at a time. We'll talk about that and we'll go through that. And I will talk to Loretta about putting that iceberg theory and the diagram of it on our website under Vince's Corner, so you can take a look at it and you can even download it if you want to. But these are the things I find so amazing today in dealing with this aspect of shame. Part of life, guys. Sorry about that, but it's all part of the journey. And the most important thing is the old saying, deal with it best you can, but don't do it alone, okay? We got each other. We can share with each other, work with each other. But we do put a lot of it onto ourselves. Because, go back to the old Iggy comic strip. I've met the enemy is me. I am the toughest critic of my own self. Isn't that amazing? When others. So I want to pray tonight and ask God to bless us and guide us as we go on this journey of learning how to just look at life through the eyes of learning, the eyes of growing, the eyes of serenity, the eyes of peace. Realize the fact we've got to go through struggles, we've got to go through hurt, we go through sickness, we go through a lot of things in life. It's the journey. You just have to be able to walk it, deal with it the best we can, but don't walk it alone. Ask God to be part of it, your higher power. Let us pray. God, we come before you tonight in prayer. We ask our higher power, our guide, our strength to walk with us on this journey called life. Teach us not to walk it alone, to ask for help, to ask for guidance, to ask for direction. And remember, every time we do ask for help and guidance, the higher power does send messengers into our life. Some of those messengers we may not like, and that's okay too. And yet we have to listen. We have to learn. Help us, please. Be our guide, be our strength. Give us the strength and give us the courage to be able to work through the different things in life that hinder our growth, realizing that we're just people on a journey. Teach us to just take life as it comes, to face it, deal with it, be open to learn from it and grow from it. And we ask God in a very special way tonight to walk with each one of us on that journey. We also pray in a very special way for those who have walked the journey before us, those people who have gone through the fight and are now back with you. We thank you, God, for them, for all the teachers, the people who have touched us in our lives, for those who have left this world. And yet, in very many ways, they are still part of us. They're part of our journey, part of our growth, part of our learning. We're praying for us. We ask for the strength, for this guidance, and to be open to direction in the course of our journey in life. We ask this for your guidance, and we ask this in your name. Amen. And I'm going to ask if you don't mind unmuting yourself, and we're going to try to do a version of the Serenity Prayer, the we version of the Serenity Prayer. We're going to do the best now.
God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. God's will, not mine, be done.